Let me tell you about something that happened to me, and though I'm not great at writing, I'll try to explain it well. My name is Carlos, and I'm 30 years old. I love walking in the woods and on trails. I live in a small town called Green Valley, which is north of Phoenix, Arizona. My brother, Miguel, has a small house and a barn near a place called Pine Hill, which is about 9 miles from where I live. Sometimes I go visit Miguel and other family members there. This happened in November 2022, just when autumn was ending. The leaves had almost all fallen, and the forest looked all orange and brown. One day, I decided to go for a walk alone on a trail near Miguel's house. It's a narrow trail that connects several rural properties. As I was walking, I was surprised to find a duffel bag on the ground, in the middle of the woods. The bag looked relatively new, not dirty or anything, like it had been left there recently. But there was a really bad smell coming from the bag, like something rotten. I thought the worst but knew I had to open the bag to see what was inside, just in case it was a person. I was trying to gather the courage to open the zipper when suddenly I heard footsteps coming from off the trail and a voice saying, "That's mine. Don't touch it." A big man, wearing a dirty jacket and jeans, quickly came out of the woods and grabbed the duffel bag off the ground. We looked at each other for a moment. I told him I thought the bag had been forgotten by someone, and he said he was storing his hunt in the bag. Even though I'm not a hunter, I knew it was standard to use a cooler for fresh meat, not a duffel bag. Also, that wouldn't explain the rotten smell, as dead bodies usually start to smell after a few days, not immediately. I apologized and continued walking down the trail, a little faster. The man probably noticed my nervousness because I heard the duffel bag drop to the ground as I was walking away. But when I looked back, the man was no longer there. I kept walking, nervous, and took out my phone to try to call my brother and ask him to pick me up, but I didn't have any signal in the woods. I had no choice but to keep moving forward and avoid crossing paths with that man again. But as I continued walking, I kept hearing leaves crunching not far behind me. Every time I looked back, I didn't see anyone, but eventually, I realized I was being followed. I saw the man in the distance, hiding behind a tree. Without thinking, I started running as fast as I could down the trail. I knew I was being followed because I could hear the leaves crunching not far behind me. I came to an abandoned property with overgrown grass. I was too tired to keep running, so I tried to enter the old house through the back door and managed to get inside. I hid under a bed in the first bedroom I found and heard the back door open again, followed by heavy footsteps moving quickly. The footsteps went from room to room, and I could hear the man's heavy breathing. The footsteps came into the bedroom for a second and then left immediately. He didn't look under either of the two beds. I heard the back door open and slam shut again, but I stayed under the bed for another half an hour, not taking any chances. I only got up when I realized it would be dark soon and I needed to get to a road to call for help. I left the house and ran down the dirt path next to the house, which was probably used as a driveway in the past, and it led me to a road. From there, I eventually got a passing car to give me a lift back to my brother's house, where I called the local police department to report what happened. Given the seriousness of the case, the police came to the house to get a more detailed description of the man's face, the location where it happened, and other information. Although it was never technically confirmed what was in that duffel bag, the rotten smell was a big clue. But the fact that the man chased me so intensely shows that he was hiding something he didn't want anyone to see, most likely a dead body. This experience left me really scared, and since then, I've been much more cautious about walking alone in the woods. In the summer of 2017, my wife Sarah and I decided to spend a weekend camping on an island we love visiting. We had done this many times before and felt pretty confident in our camping skills. The island had beautiful beaches and thick forests, making it a great spot to get away from everything. We had lots of good trips there, but this one turned out to be very different. Sarah and I set up our camp on a remote beach, far from any roads or towns. We liked the peace and quiet, and we kept a fire going. To get to the trail, we had to walk a kilometer along the beach and then 2 kilometers through the forest to reach the road. That day, we met another camper named Tom from Ireland. Tom was planning to sleep in his van parked on the road. We invited him to join us at the beach for a fire. The 3 of us shared a bottle of wine and talked around the fire. As the sun went down, things started to get strange. We began to hear what sounded like female voices coming from the bushes behind us. It wasn't too dark yet, so we thought it might be other campers or hikers nearby, or maybe the sound was just bouncing off the trees in a weird way. But we all agreed we were hearing female voices. As it got darker, Tom decided to head back to his van before it was too late. Sarah and I stayed by our campsite and kept the fire going because Sarah was getting scared by the voices, which continued into the night. The voices sounded like two women talking, but we couldn't understand what was being said. They seemed to be coming from just beyond the tree line. We stayed up very late, keeping the fire burning. Only when the voices finally stopped did we decide to put out the fire and go to sleep in our tent. Before doing so, we scanned the area with a flashlight, looking for any boats that might be the source of the voices, but we saw nothing. Around 3 a.m., we lay down to sleep. About 15 minutes later, we heard footsteps near our campsite, coming from the bushes behind us. We hoped it was just a bear or some other animal, as black bears on the island are usually shy around people. The footsteps moved from the fire to our tent and then back into the woods. 5 minutes later, the footsteps returned to the fire. Now, we clearly heard two female voices speaking gibberish very loudly. The voices didn't sound like any language we knew. They moved from the fire to our tent, still talking loudly, stood over the tent for a few seconds, and then went completely silent. The voices went back into the woods and were never heard again. Sarah and I lay there, frozen with fear, for a long time. We finally fell asleep and woke up around 11 a.m. the next day. We packed up and left, never to return. We probably made the best decision by staying quiet in the tent and not drawing attention to ourselves from whoever or whatever was outside. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had experienced something truly strange. It was like the island had its own secrets, and we had stumbled onto one of them. Every time I think back to that night, I get chills. It's a memory that stays with me, and I know it stays with Sarah too. We talk about it sometimes, wondering what really happened and who those voices belong to. But I guess we'll never know. The following is a detailed and realistic retelling of my personal experience. My name is Alex Johnson, and I live in a small town called Riverview, just west of Denver, Colorado. I've always loved exploring the outdoors, and over the past few years, my best friend Sam Taylor and I have spent a lot of time hiking through various forests and trails near our town. We're both 25 and share a passion for finding interesting and sometimes weird stuff in the woods. One day, on July 10th, 2023, I decided to go hiking in Pinewood Forest, about 8 miles west of Denver. Sam couldn't come that day, so I went alone. As I walked deeper into the forest, I started noticing some pretty strange things. There were piles of animal bones scattered around, and lots of old junk that people had dumped. It was creepy, but I kept going. Then I saw something really weird. Strange symbols carved into trees and animal parts arranged in odd patterns on the ground. I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew I had to show Sam, so I decided to come back the next day with him. On July 11th, Sam and I headed back to Pinewood Forest. I wanted to show him the strange things I had found. As we walked the same trail, we saw something even more disturbing. There was a severed deer head placed in the middle of a pentagram made out of deer legs. This was definitely not there the day before. The sun was starting to set, so we decided it was time to head back to the car. But as we walked, we realized we didn't recognize the path we were on. We tried to remember our way, but it was getting dark, and we were starting to panic. We used our phone flashlights to try and find the trail, but it only made the shadows seem scarier. Then we both started to feel like we were being watched. We heard rustling in the bushes about 20 feet to our right, and it was weird because there was no wind that night. Our hearts were racing as we hurried down a path we hoped would lead us back to the car. Suddenly, we heard a scream, a deep and horrifying sound that didn't seem human or animal. We started running as fast as we could. I didn't dare look back, but Sam did. He swore he saw a large black figure on the trail behind us, something too big to be human. We kept running, not stopping until we finally saw the car. We jumped in and drove straight home, shaking and scared. Once we got home, I did some research online. I found out that Pinewood Forest had a history of weird cult activities, murders, and disappearances. It made sense why we had felt so scared. Since that day, I haven't gone back to that forest, and I don't plan to. In another creepy story, two friends, Mark and David, were hiking in northern Poland. They were in an area that used to be part of the old Soviet Union. They found these strange pipes sticking out of the ground like periscopes. Feeling curious, they decided to check it out. They discovered a doorway hidden behind some bushes, covered by a big wooden lid. Underneath, they found an old army bunker. The bunker was huge, with lots of tunnels going in different directions, like a maze. Mark and David tried to stay close to each other because they didn't want to get lost. As they went deeper, they found writing on the walls in Polish, which translated to help. But they kept going, even though the place was falling apart and getting creepier. They saw more writings on the walls, this time saying things like, "Hello, Satan, I love you." Some of the tunnels were flooded and smelled really bad, like sewage. They eventually found a big room with a weird machine in the middle. There was also a single shoe stuck in the muck on the floor, like someone had left in a big hurry. The bunker was probably used by soldiers during World War II, but it looked like they had left in a rush. Mark and David couldn't figure out why, or who had written the scary messages on the walls. It was a mystery that stayed with them long after they left the bunker. Both of these experiences were really unsettling and have made me think twice about where I go hiking. There's a lot of weird stuff out there, and sometimes it's better not to go looking for it.